current pitching coach at Escondido High School. Eric Brothers, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you making the drive out. I know normal times, like we talked about, it'd be tough to do, but I appreciate you coming out and being able to be part of this. So one of the things we do, as we talked about a little bit earlier, I want to let everybody know a little bit about your background. You know, obviously baseball is a big thing if you're a pitching coach. So go back as far as you want and tell us how you came to be the pitching coach at Escondido.
Sure. So graduated from Valley Center High School, and you and I first met. It was my junior year when I tried out for Baseball Factory, and that really kind of started the college recruiting process for me. And it was right before my junior season, I guess it was, that I started getting some exposure and talking to colleges, getting emails, going to showcases. Whether it was the Baseball Factory Team 1 West. I got recruited to go out to the East Coast and play for a week out there. And then, started going on unofficial visits. And, I was getting excited, getting pro scout questionnaires. And then stuff just kind of started falling by the wayside. And, I had a little arm issue. Instead of pronating, I started getting on the outside trying to get some more control. But, that caused some arm issues. And that attention that I was getting stopped. It started worrying me a little bit. But then my senior year, just their spring break trip, University of Sioux Falls came out, and they were playing like Cal State San Marcos and Concordia Irvine. And, they came up and saw a bullpen of mine. And, within, I think, about a month, I went on a visit. I applied, I got accepted, and I got a scholarship offer, and I committed. So, that was April of my senior year. And, it was kind of cool to have it all fall into place like that. And so, I got up there and started playing right as a freshman, started pitching, and, didn't have the results that I wanted the first couple of years, even the first 3 years. And when I really started focusing on what worked for me as opposed to like what other people do, that's really when I started seeing that success come my senior year. I dedicated myself in the weight room harder than I ever had, and I put on about 15 pounds in 3 months in the off season. Started eating better and really paying attention to what I was eating. The classroom was never an issue. Academics were fine. But then the senior year, towards the end, once we started getting it into our conference, like every outing I had got better and better and better. And one of the spans that I like to tell my kids about was the last 9 days of the season. I had 4 appearances. I had over 14 innings pitched in the last 6 days. And I started Sunday, went 7 against our number 3 team in the country, Minnesota State Mankato. Wednesday, I went 5 against our rival in a start, and then I came out of the bullpen Friday and 3-2 plus. So it was a testament to the work that I put in and my body being ready for that and mentally being able to handle that pressure. So that kind of led into my 5th year of school, being a double major and being ready for student teaching. I had 5 years of school, so I was giving lessons through in a sports complex and a training program that one of my buddies started out there. And then I was coaching Legion baseball actually that summer before. So that's really when I started coaching. It was a great opportunity that, really solidified that coaching is what I wanted to do when I was done playing. And that spring when I was student teaching, I was the head JV coach for a school out there. And, I loved every minute of it. And then I graduated, got married, and I was playing independent ball in the Pecos League, and just really enjoying the grind. It really was. It was getting there at 11 for practice, and then it was weights, and then it was eating, and then it was a game. And whether we drove to another city or went back to our host family's house, I loved every minute of it. Obviously, I wasn't in it for the money at that level, but to say that I played professionally and had some success with it was something that I'll cherish really forever. So then I played that one summer and started at Escondido that fall.
It's interesting because I always have that's how I always like to start the interviews, because for one, depending on the person, like for you, we go back, you were 15, 16 when I met you, and now I'm older, but I forget all of that stuff. We kind of, either through text or when I would run into you, we'd kind of catch up on all that stuff, but I start to forget. And then now you're at that age where you're a couple years into your coaching and you're teaching, and so you've already kind of evolved into that different role. And it's interesting to hear, having talked to other coaches and other former players, that you started making that transition early, to where some other players, it was kind of a grudgingly, well, I still want to stay in baseball, but I can't play anymore, so I might as well coach.
Yeah.
So when do you remember, was it prior to that, or when you were somewhere in your college career, that you had decided you wanted to go into teaching and possibly coaching?
Well, initially the plan when I was in high school, like I wanted to get into business. I'm good with numbers. Like my dad was in business, and I saw like what he was able to provide for us and our family. And then in 2010, times got rough, and it was actually 2011, like right before I started, applying to University of Sioux Falls. He was like, you don't want to do this. Like, what are you good at? What do you want to do? And up until that point, I never considered teaching. And he like kept probing questions, and it finally got to the point where like I considered teaching, and he was like, well, if you do that, you can't coach. And so I think that made it even more appealing to me, that, I could be in the classroom with kids, but then I could also stay around sports and help with sports, for as long as I want. So I think it was, my senior year in high school.
Well, and that's, looking back on it, you're probably looking at that as a fortunate thing, because some guys get out of baseball and it's that, which way do I go? There's that kind of lost transition, and you kind of grudgingly go into that end. But, as we're talking, I'm kind of thinking that when all the years I've been with the baseball factory, there's probably 5 or 6 guys, and no disrespect to all of the other kids that we worked with, but there's maybe 5 or 6 players that always stood out to me, like on the first impression, you being one of them. And I remember even back when you were younger, our conversation that we had after you did your showcase, there's just something about your mental makeup that I kind of always liked, and I guess last night was funny, as I was kind of going over the interview in my head, I was thinking somewhere along like a John Smoltz, kind of a very focused when you pitched, even when it was just a showcase or a bullpen, and it didn't ever look as though you weren't 100% in that moment when you were on the mound, which is tough to find. You can see sometimes, and you now as a coach, some of your pitchers, they kind of go in and out from inning to inning. And that's interesting as I'm talking to you, wondering if you're able to see that in players, or if you're able to see the makeup in guys that where maybe now you look at them and go, hey, in a year or two, this guy's going to be something.
Yeah, and that's something that I've really tried to hone in on. Like, when it's hard to think back to when I was playing and all the showcases and stuff, because I was so in that moment, and it just seemed natural. Like, I don't know who was in the stands, I don't know who was saying what. I just was so focused on what I had to do that like everything kind of fell away, because it wasn't important at the time. So now looking at kids and seeing the pitchers that I have and what I get to work with, not only do I get to help change their mechanics and improve their mechanics so they can throw better, more efficiently, harder, with more control, I also get to help with that mental aspect. Like, what were you thinking? How were you approaching this? Like on that 1-2 fastball, where were you aiming, and why didn't it happen? So being able to not only get that mechanics aspect, but also improve on how they're approaching it, and help the mental side of it as well. I really appreciate.
Yeah. Do you have, just an example, do you have a lot of students, even be more specific, pitchers in your classes?
The level of math that I teach is primarily freshmen. So I don't get as much time with the lower levels in the program, unfortunately, just because of being outfield and pitching, on the varsity level. So I have had a couple. There's this one kid who's a senior this year, and he was one of the best athletes I've ever seen. And so having him as a freshman in my class and seeing the squirrely 14-year-old kid, and now seeing him as a senior, almost 18, like seeing that growth and being able to help that mental side actually kick in now because he can handle it, that's been pretty rewarding to see.
Yeah, the reason I asked that question is because when I was coaching, I was never in the classroom. So everything that information-wise, I had to gather was on field. And so one of the ways I figured to speed that up was I would give just small little fun tests. It would be, what did Babe Ruth do? And you'd have the letters to coincide with the numbers, and you'd have Pete Rose and, what did he do? Or you would do game charts, situational things, kind of a reading math problem, runner on second, 2 outs, you're at the plate, 2 strike, really get them in. And I would kind of look at those and just see which guys were like a regular class running through them and which guys actually read them. But that helped me break down things. And I was wondering from a teaching standpoint, if you ever maybe kind of probe your players in the classroom, and you kind of carry that over into, because smart players are usually smart in the classroom, and guys that are low attention span are usually low attention span on the field. They correlate. Yeah. So as a coach right now, as you're working with younger players coming up, do you have a lot of interaction with your younger team, or do you stay strictly with the varsity?
Primarily with the varsity. It's probably about 90-10. I'd like it to be closer to like 75-25. They practice primarily right after school, our JV and our freshman levels. So if I can get out to practice a little bit early, I'll try to spend some time with them. But we were trying to do more classroom stuff with our varsity guys in our clubhouse before. We unfortunately had to shut down for the year. So that's primarily where my attention went.
So at the point where you guys, or everyone actually shut down, how far were you into your schedule?
We were 5 games in.
Okay.
So we were through our first tournament, about to start our second, but that week before we actually shut down school, we got rained out all 3 games. So we could have been 8 games through out of 26.
Right.
And we were 5 in.
Yeah, it's interesting because that season seems so far away, and it was really only about 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But looking at that now, prior to that, had you done a lot of winter or fall?
Yeah,
type things?
we do a lot of winter workouts, and so we start our football season. Because I coach football too, so we went through middle of November last year. And then by the time we were ready to start baseball workouts, it was Thanksgiving, 2 weeks, Christmas. And so we just told kids focus on finals, be eligible. And then as soon as we came back, that first day of classes in the spring, we had practice. So pretty much right away in January, we did a lot of winter workouts. We actually had more scrimmages this year than we had in the past. And I think that was setting us up very nicely for the spring. Unfortunately, we didn't get to keep going with that.
Yeah, it's interesting because every school has a different level of how deep they've got into it prior to the season. Some of them really turn it on in January. Some do an extended fall and then take a break. Jumping back a little bit to your college selection process, I guess. Now that you're kind of in that mentorship role and you have kids as students and you also have them as players, it almost seems like your decision was pretty easy. Like I said, again, to me, it doesn't surprise me because knowing how driven you are, you saw an opportunity, you liked the opportunity, I took it, and then I'm going to make the most of it. And then now working with kids in Southern California, you know how difficult it can be to get them to look at out-of-state opportunities. What would your advice be to not just your players, but any player that's in that process where you were now, maybe your junior, senior year, and you have opportunities out of state, and maybe you're waiting for something to happen in state?
I think you said it very well. Just like any opportunity that you have, it's what you make of it. So whether that's in state, whether that's out of state, it really doesn't matter. And I think I was right away kind of set on I'm good enough to go D1. And so I know a lot of kids fall into that trap as well. And the only thing that's different about JUCO, D2, D1 is just consistency and amount of funds and availability for that at the next level. So, be open to any opportunity that comes its way. And if you want to get something out of it, be ready to work for it.
Now, again, knowing your background and your makeup, you still had to learn something or a lot from being away from home. Sioux Falls is a big difference. It's not like an Arizona school in Oregon, so it's kind of a remote area and it's a school that not a lot of people have seen. So what are some things that you learned or maybe helped you mature by being away from home and going away?
Yeah, I mean, Sioux Falls is just for comparison. Like Escondido now is about 160,000, and Sioux Falls was about 160,000. But that's the biggest city in the state, and it's just it's a whole different world. So
Yeah.
I think that was a big culture shock for me right away. But I was fortunate to meet some people there. You know, my roommate, some guys across the hall. Later, I ended up meeting my wife there. You know, my sophomore year. And so just being able to surround myself with people and really finding out who I was and how to portray that to people I've never met before, going somewhere I'd never met anyone, just really solidified who I kind of am today. And just being able to learn, you know, how do I create a budget for food, because I don't have my parents to go say, hey, can I have some money? Learning how to grocery shop and actually buy good food for you and how to cook.
Right.
That definitely was a big thing for me. I'm thankful, you know, my parents, they kind of taught me that at the beginning before I left. And, you know, I've been doing my own laundry for a couple of years, so that wasn't like a culture shock for me. But, you know, we were a small campus. We were 3 city blocks by 4 city blocks. From one end of campus to the far corner took about a 6-minute walk. So just surrounding myself with people that were from there and, you know, being real with them, that's definitely something that got me through it.
Well, that's definitely a different culture and environment altogether, just as the way that they go about things, the pace, the way that they kind of view things on the outside. I'm sure that there you probably met people that look at California and think, wow, there's no way I'd want to, like the way we look at New York sometimes, you know, we think we're a big city and then you go there. So for you as a young man leaving San Diego, you said it was a culture shock. So when you go, what would be your advice if you were to give that to someone that's, say, maybe looking at a school in that area, or maybe in a smaller town, not necessarily a bigger town, but something where maybe I've never heard of that school. I don't know any of the schools that they play. You know, nobody's going to see me, because that's a lot of the things that you probably hear with kids. They're really worried about what it looks like from the outside, not whether it's a good fit for them.
And I think that's part of it. It's not being worried about what other people see it as, but what you see it as. And it goes back to the whole mental makeup of, if you think it's going to be awful, it's going to be awful. And if you think that it's going to potentially help you and get you where you need to be, it's going to help you and get you where you need to be. It was one thing when I intended on signing my letter of intent with them, you know, my dad told me, if you go there, you're going to graduate from there. And so I kind of knew that, you know, the brutal winters were something I was going to have to endure for 5 years or 4 years. And it's something you deal with. So if you let things affect you, such as how other people see it and how other people might see it, then you're going to be questioning things and you're not going to get anything out of it. So, you know, if you feel like it's a good fit for you and you are going to make something out of it, there's no reason you should be able to go to all those small schools.
It's interesting because you're kind of in the age where I've got 3 or 4 people that I've interviewed. And so I jokingly say you guys are kind of the last of your breed, because you're just a little older than the kids that are coming up now. But the way that you just explained it, you don't run into a lot of kids that were 16, 17 that would see it the same way, especially now that in high school and in college, kids seem to be so transient. You know, it's not working out here, so it's not me. It's got to be the program or the coaches, so I'm going to go here.
Right.
It's not working out here. You know, so you see so many kids that maybe they've made 3 or 4 stops at junior colleges, or they've made 2 or 3 stops, you know, to where the advice you were given is, if you commit, you're going to see that commitment through.
And that's something I really appreciate, was my parents, you know, reinforced all the time. If you start something, you're going to finish it. And if you finish your commitment and it's not for you, then find something else. But the support that they gave me through everything, you know, when I was playing a sport, if I had good grades and I was playing a sport, I didn't have to work. So I didn't pay for anything in high school. And, you know, I appreciate my parents being able to do that. And it's just, it reinforced, when you make a commitment to something, you honor that commitment. And just work for what you want.
Yeah. And you can actually see how for you it played out on the field too. And so when you're using some of those things, let's say for instance you're working with a younger pitcher, and for me anyway, I think adversity helps develop pitchers more than success. And that's probably the same for any sport, because you learn more from that. And when you have a pitcher that's out struggling, do you know at this point with your players which which player is going to continue through there or which guy I need to go get right away? Do you get that feel from some players?
I wouldn't say that I go out and pull them right away.
Mm-hmm.
I go out and I talk to them and say, hey, I think this is the problem. Or I'll flat out say, like, hey, what's going on? And I'll just give them a chance to get words out. And if the umpire's going to come visit, then I'll keep talking to them.
Yeah.
So I kind of know who I can be a little more stern with, who I can say, hey, this is the problem, knock it off. Like, here's what you need to be doing. Or there's the kids where they're a little more mysterious. I kind of have to probe them a little bit more and figure out where they're at before I can try to help them through that issue.
So what are some of the things that you maybe learned from either high school coaches, pitching coaches, or your college pitching coaches that you try to instill in the players that you have now from a pitching standpoint?
He's actually not a pitching coach.
Okay.
My college head coach, Matt
Okay.
Giuliano. He's a local guy. Grew up in Valley Center. Now he's back at Cal State San Marcos. But he was the head coach at USF for about 8 or 9 years. And just baseball was simple for him. And so that simplification process of like, here's my job and I'm going to do it, or that walking the line between cockiness and confidence. So where you fully believe in your abilities and it's almost perceived as arrogance from the outside. And just when that finally clicked for me of, my stuff's good, you're not going to beat me, I'm going to beat you, and here's how I'm going to do it. That's when it finally really started clicking for me. Instead of, well, if I throw this curveball here in this count, this guy might not hit it. And instead of, I'm going to throw this best pitch, and I don't think you can.
It's interesting too, because as I'm listening to you talk, I can see you on the mound doing those things. Because I remember the few times I've seen you throwing in games, and so as a pitcher, you probably know that positive outlook. You know, if I get on the mound and I'm iffy about this curveball, then it's going to come out iffy, and it's not going to end well.
Yeah.
Or if I get into trouble and I don't have that confidence bordering on arrogance, it's probably not going to end well for me. And one of the things about baseball that most kids don't understand is that you need to have that chip on your shoulder, because you're going to have far more bad days than good. Just the nature of the game, you know, and being able to overcome that. So as a coach, in your routines with the players, or, you know, as you're working them out, is there something that you do to help build that competitiveness in them, or something that kind of builds that drive to overcome?
One of the things that I can really think of is just like guys in bullpens. I set pitch limits and say, you're going to throw a 25 today, you're going to throw 40. And whether they end on a good pitch or not, or whether they're feeling good or not, I cut it off right there. And one of the reasons why is not every pitch that you're going to have is going to be your best stuff. And every day, you know, say you're on a 5-man rotation in an independent league, you might have 3 of your 4 pitches one start, you might have 2 of them the next start. So being able to make the best of what you've got and focusing on certain areas of improvement is better than focusing on, well, I didn't paint the perfect location on this pitch. And so trying to drive them to make the best pitches with their stuff wherever it is on a certain day, and not focusing on the perfect result. And so just trying to get them to do that more frequently, even if their stuff's not the best.
Yeah. I mean, just lately looking to a lot of different coaching philosophies and things. One of the things I'm really interested now, because everyone has a different way of going about it, but trying to create that competitive environment in practice to get them to learn that, because I think, and you can expand on this, but now that you see that showcase generation, you know, you were kind of at the beginning of it, and now most of your kids are involved in it. It's hard for them to keep that level up when you know it doesn't matter, I'm only throwing 2 innings and then I'm done. Is that something that you think right now is a positive, or maybe that's something that needs to change as far as how kids are getting that exposure and that evaluation?
I think the showcases are kind of unnatural in terms of people just being able to go out and focus for a certain amount of time. But I know the evaluators, they're watching the stuff even when you're not performing.
Right.
It's like how you conduct yourself on the field and how you're conducting yourself around the other players. And so I think that competitive aspect is really what needs to be the basis for like the evaluations, because some people might not perform well and they might get down on themselves and then they might just give up on the showcase, whereas in a game they might be the gamer, they might be that person that you want. And so I like the tournaments and the show, the not so much the pro style tryout for the high school age kids, just because I don't think they're able to fully handle that pressure and know when to show off and when to stay within your own means and do what you can do. I think they're trying to meet expectations of what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to proving what they're able to do the best.
It's interesting talking to someone in your generation, for lack of a better word, because when I played, there were no showcases. You know, there was just, you played American Legion in the summer. If you did, if not, you went to football and something. There was no year-round anything. And so now you've come out through that end, and, you know, maybe it benefited how you were selecting your college. Maybe it didn't. You know, from, like I said, reading some of your back stuff, there's all kinds of stuff online, some of your high school stories from the local newspapers, and I mean, you're a high school superhero. But, you know, now I wonder how much the kids are getting from that, because, like you said, they know what to say when a coach talks to them. They know what we're looking for. They've done it before, so they kind of know the script to the test. And like you said, it makes it tough because they know the questions, but if you deviate from that, it's hard to find out. And that mental makeup is tough to find. So when you're going through, let's say, your pitchers that come in and they're working with you starting in September, October, whenever you guys go, what is your typical timeline, or what does your program look like for getting them going as a freshman coming into your program, or your regular varsity guys?
I mean, our first thing that we stress is we want you playing catch and being able to long toss as much as you can once you're properly warmed up. One big thing that I pushed with our head coach this year was I want J bands, I want Jaeger bands for our program, and so he went and got 10 at the ABCA conference, and that was big. You know, as soon as we got him, like, I showed the whole program, all freshmen up to our seniors, like, this is what we're going to do every day you throw, and just really starting that off and increasing strength and flexibility of the arm, and our proper arm care was big. And then it's long tossing as much as you can. Then it's, we're going to focus on fastball changeup, and once you can spot your fastball changeup, then we're going to work on some other off-speed stuff and the proper way to throw that, and trying to do that as appropriate, instead of saying, like, okay, now it's November, now we're going to throw 3 curveballs in your bullpens, now it's January, we're going to throw 10. Like, we're kind of as you're ready. And if your mechanics are not good enough to throw curveballs or sliders, we're not going to throw those. And so, I mean, the 2 best pitches are in baseball are well-located fastball and a good changeup. And so, really starting with that and then building off of that.
Well, let me have you expand on that, because I'm glad you said that too, because it's for the kids that do watch, and whether they're working with me or working with you or any of the other coaches, sometimes parents don't want to hear that. When you mention those 2 pitches, that's one of the things that I remember. You had a pretty sharp slider, but you had pretty good arm speed. You actually had a lot of flexibility in your body, so you were able to throw that. So when you talk to your players about that, how is it that you get them to understand that just because you see someone throwing a curveball on TV, that's not their main pitch, or, you know, it's not something that you used 50% of the time? When you're working with the players, how do you explain that to them, or how do you get them to, for lack of a better phrase, buy into that?
I think a lot of it comes with flat grounds and just spending time with them working on those pitches, because the changeup's a field pitch, so they have to be comfortable with it, which means you have to throw it more. Right. And so getting a changeup that works for them, feels good for them, and they can have success with, I think is the biggest solidifier of that feeling and that thought of, well, if I can throw a fastball and a changeup and I can keep hitters off balance with those 2 pitches, and now I mix in a third, now we're really going to be able to mess with their head and get them really uncomfortable in the box. But the reason why it's a fastball changeup is the arm speed's the same, the release point's pretty much the same, and the only difference between a changeup and a fastball is not snapping through and getting your middle 2 fingers over instead of your first 2. And so they're almost the same pitch.
Well, I'm kind of using this as a public service, because you went through the baseball factory, and one of the things when we're doing the pitchers, especially now that we start younger, and we have the 12 and 13s kids come in, and you get them in the bullpen. And, okay, what do you throw? 1, 2, 3, 4, and after about 2, you're just like, okay, how many of these are going to actually reach the plate? And even with high school guys, you see them throwing balls and they're flying out and they're spinning and they're spiking, and you just, as an evaluator, you're just there to take notes and write down what you see. But as a coach, you're looking and you're thinking somebody needs to really explain to him, let's focus on the 2 that you can win with. So sometimes kids don't understand you can win with 1 pitch if you can really, really master that. And like you had mentioned before, in your bullpen, sometimes you don't have your best pitch, but I'm not going to tell the coach I can't play. I'm going to try and do what I can with that 1 pitch that's working. So when you're trying to develop your arm strength or the long toss and the bands, is there something else that you do for your guys that you, as far as maybe even in the weight room or conditioning, things like that you do that you really want them to make part of their program?
We do quite a bit of conditioning, and I try to pull some of the stuff that we did in college, whether it's jog, sprint jogs, whether it's bow and arrows, whether it's just like 2 groups, wall sits and sprints on shuttles, just building that conditioning in to help them feel better about their legs and help them have more confidence late in games, late in the season. That's one thing that I've really kind of enjoyed putting in, because in high school I was one that tried to get away from that as much as possible. Nobody likes running and says let's play baseball because of all the running. So that's one big proper arm care thing that I think a lot of baseball players at that age need, is just let's not push through the arm pain and pop a bunch of painkillers. Let's run it out. Let's get the lactic acid out of the elbow, and let's do some recovery work. We also have some of those 2-pound exercise balls, and we do some other shoulder care with that, and that's also been a big part of what we do.
Now, do you guys do a weight program in the fall or the winter with your guys?
Because I've been so busy with football the last 3 years, that's not been a part that I've had, but we do encourage them to go do that. And if they need exercises, for my master's program, I actually created a strength and conditioning program designed for baseball players, and so I've given that to some of our kids before, and they've had a bit of success with that.
Yeah, that's sometimes at the high school level that can be hit and miss, because again, like you said, there's always those kids, and high school guys, they're always comparing and they're always challenging each other, and the kids that may not be as athletic or as strong tend to shy away from those tests of strength, is the way they look at it, and they don't like to be in the weight room. So a lot of times it's tough to get them to do that, because there's that macho thing, or sometimes they're being put in the generic weightlifting type of thing where it may not be beneficial to their specific position. So, and it is specific. And then even with pitchers, it's even more specific, because there's certain joints and muscles you don't want to stretch. And you also want to try to get them into some type of flexibility. Do you guys do anything, maybe in the yoga, Pilates, things like that?
We haven't gotten into that. I think just with the time constraints that we've got, and sharing our varsity field, JV varsity, I think that's something that maybe we should get into in the future. But it's a grind when our games are supposed to be Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and we've got practice Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It kind of falls by the wayside, unfortunately.
But that actually, lends to a good example, because a lot of the kids now, and you can even speak from this from playing in the Pecos League professional to now trying to explain to kids that playing 170 games a year, you're not in a physical position to do that. There's a reason that they're professional baseball players, because you have that grind and you work for such a short period of time. And most of the high school players that I know, they usually tend to lose weight during the season because they don't eat right and the schedule's longer, so I'm tired, and at that age I want to come home and go to sleep, and in the morning I don't want to get up. I'd rather sleep than eat, and maybe I'm grabbing something out of the snack bar that I shouldn't be eating before the game, and you know how that works. But as far as your guys, is there anything that you do nutrition wise that you guys talk about, or that you have them do prior to games, things like that?
We emphasize trying to eat right and watching what you eat. but at the end of the day, they're 16 to 18-year-olds. They're going to do what they want.
Right.
So we try to emphasize it, but just resource-wise, it's hard to provide that for the kids and say, like, here you go, here's your meals for the day, or here's your snack.
Sure.
So I wish that funding was available, but unfortunately, it's just not.
Well, it's interesting because that was one of the things that I'd mentioned before that my wife teaches, and then working at a middle school. I personally would like to see education lean a little bit more towards practical things, teaching kids about proper diet, teaching kids about proper exercise, taking care of yourself, because that all comes back. And as a teacher, you can see that too. You know which kids don't get enough sleep. You know which kids don't eat right, because it all comes back to your focus and your attention and your ability to have stamina just to be in class for 6 periods, and then baseball. Is there anything, let's say, from now looking the way things are going to be afterwards? We talked about everything's going to change. On a personal level, is there something that you would like to see change about maybe youth baseball, high school baseball coming out of this? Things that might be, they're going to be different no matter what, but is there something that you would like to see that you think might be a positive change coming out of this?
I think more funding for kind of implementing those nutrition programs like you're talking about. Maybe not full programs, but offer supplements. So like at our school, we've got an after school lunch program. Can part of that funding go directly to athletes? And can we get that for other more protein based things that are going to help with their muscle development, muscle recovery, and all of that? That would be very nice. At the younger levels, one thing I hope happens because of this is kind of the necessity of it. And I know numbers are dwindling in athletics and youth programs, and I hope that because of this, people realize that's something that we need for a social aspect, we need for the health aspect, and just the participation in, the relationship aspect of people that are around you.
Yeah, I can imagine from all of the levels you played at, just going back as far as high school to college, there's probably a number of things that stick out to you that baseball taught me that, and for kids, I think just being active, it's just, as a coach now, you can see that there's something from sports that's your medium to teach kids. That's how you connect with kids. That's how you maybe get that player that's not that strong student. Hey, I wasn't that good at this either, but because I wanted to play baseball, I had to be good at this. And I think it's really important. And I think going forward, and now you've been married and you have these high school kids with you, how do you think it's going to change now that some of them haven't had baseball every weekend, or for your guys, baseball 3 days a week? Because sometimes kids will come back and they'll want it more, and some kids may come back and go, I was okay without it. How do you think that's going to be?
I hope it's more in that first part. I hope it's, man, I really miss this. Man, I really need this. And that drive intensifies. And there's kind of a fire under them now to work harder than ever at it before. But yeah, there's going to be some part of it that's just like, yeah, I guess I was kind of on the fence. I was just doing this to hang out with my friends. I don't really need this. And that's pretty unfortunate. Like, I think of everything that the game of baseball has taught me, because it really does teach you a lot about life when you look at it. I think about everywhere it's taken me. I think about everyone that it's led me to meet. And I'm extremely grateful for the game of baseball. I got paid pennies on the hour to play a game, and I wish it would have kept going, but now I get to use my passion and my experience and all the knowledge that I've gained to try to give to the younger kids. So I hope that they find that in baseball or another sport if baseball is not for them.
Yeah, I'm curious about that as well, because one of the things we've talked about in other interviews is that it seems like now if you go through Facebook or Instagram or any of those mediums, every coach in the country is putting out a video to hit or to field or with drills, which is great. And you've been in it long enough to know that there's no original drill anymore at this point. We've all taken something and modified it to someone specific. And I'm curious to see which players actually took advantage of all that. Because you see those kids that technically they should still been in school these last 8 weeks, but mentally they've been on summer already. Yeah. And now they're just going to go into an extended summer. And if they come back, they took that entire 8, 10, 16 weeks, whatever it ends up being, and did nothing, and then all of a sudden we're going to try to rally in a week or two. And what do you mean we're going to have a tournament? What do you mean we're going to have games? So I really hope the kids took advantage of this time to utilize all that. You, like I said, you were kind of on the beginning of that, but now you can look up pretty much any sport, stretching, arm care, and it's all there.
Yeah.
Take advantage of it and use it. So is that going into that, as far as video, do you use a lot of video with your pitchers?
I kind of video them for immediate feedback on here's what I'm seeing, here's what it looks like, and that kind of cements what I'm sharing with them. It helps make that change a little bit more immediate. It's on my cell phone, but what we were trying to do this year was we were trying to set up cameras at our field for live streaming games for extended family members, or in the future we could be using that for college recruiting, like, hey, here's all this footage that we have on this kid. So it's something that I want to get more into on that feedback with them. So hopefully that is one change that we can have in our program after this.
Good. Yeah, it's definitely been something that I've had to get more involved in working forward, and even if it's just so I can break things down for them and make notes on it and send it to them so they can go back and look at it. Because as a teacher, you probably already know that there's different ways to connect, and sometimes with athletes that's the only way. They're physical, so they need to know that they're doing that part of their life correctly so they can excel somewhere else or have that confidence. Any thoughts about maybe moving up eventually to the college level? Or
I've thought about it, but I love teaching. I love being at Escondido, and I love the environment that's there. So it'd be really hard to give that up, but I've thought about it. Who knows? Maybe when I get tired of teaching towards the end of my career, I'll think about it. But right now, I love being a math teacher. I love being a football and a baseball coach on campus, and just seeing that age. The high schoolers are so influential, and just being able to share some experience and some of the lessons that I've learned with them is pretty rewarding.
Yeah, you're in a good area there because you have a lot of opportunity both at the JC, the D2, in that area to move up. And I'm 100% certain that opportunity is going to come up for you soon. So I was just curious how that would, if there's a timeline, or if you have an idea, or you've maybe had conversations with anyone about maybe doing it, or how much thought you put into it.
I'd been asked to volunteer, but again, it just would have been conflicting with my teaching schedule.
Yeah.
My wife just went back to work and got her teaching credential and her master's, so maybe when she gets a little more concretely in a school district, maybe I can consider it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's hard, especially when you're in the coaching end, because you've been around coaches, and the nature of that job is to move. So when you find an area that you like, it's really tough to stay in one spot when an opportunity comes up. And for you being from San Diego and you're in a position right now that you're happy with, it's kind of tough to think about those. But personally, I'd be curious to see how you would do with just an older pitching staff. The makeup that you have and the focus that you have for pitching itself. It's tough to find guys that really enjoy working one part of the game, and trying to get as far ahead of it. How about head coaching? Is that something you've thought about?
Hopefully I can, take over that program at some point while I'm at Escondido. If I am fortunate enough to do that, that'd be great. If I'm just a pitching coach while I'm there, that'd be great too. Maybe at the next level if that ever comes up also. But there's something special about working with pitchers. They have the most stress, the most focus is on them, and they're involved in every play in baseball. So it's like you said, it's a very specific area, and it's kind of close to me, obviously.
So going back a little bit, and I was thinking, because we kind of went through it real fast, but your time in the Pecos League. So how did you end up going through a tryout, or did someone come out and talk to you? What made you decide to take that jump there?
So, I played my 4 years, and then I was talking to Matt, my head coach at USF, and it was just like, well, what next? What do I do? And he kind of suggested looking at some of those tryouts for whether it was the Frontier or the Pecos. And so I was looking, and there was a tryout in LA for the Pecos League. And so I flew out Friday night, because I had classes and I was given lessons and stuff. So flew out Friday night, went to the tryout Saturday, flew back Sunday, and ended up getting a call a couple of weeks later saying I was invited to their spring training in Houston, Texas. And so I went there for the month of March. And I was there for about 21 days. We were staying in a Motel 6, 4 of us in a room with a little kitchenette in there.
Good times, huh?
Yeah, it was an experience.
Yeah.
But it was, it was wake up, you go play games, you practice, and then you go back. And so that was like the first focus on baseball only. It wasn't, I was a student athlete. It was, I was an athlete. And that was a neat experience to be able to have that. And then at the end of that, we had 17 games or something like that, and they ended up drafting. And so I was one of the first picks in the draft, and I got picked up to go to Trinidad. And I was on my way back to finish my student teaching. I actually took 3 weeks off of my student teaching to go down there. So I'm so thankful USF allowed me to do that. And then, yeah, that was pretty much it. It was an experience.
So that was your Bull Durham.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's a good place for them to stop. So I read that in one of your bios. I think it might have been on the Sioux Falls website, or that was your favorite movie. So now you're at that point too, where we run into this, and some of the other coaches. When you reference some of those movies, do your guys know what you're talking about?
A lot of them know. I asked them if they've seen movies like Bull Durham. What? So, no.
Yeah, I'm curious too. And again, you being on the educational side, there's a part of me that wants to have our guys sit down and watch them just for the baseball value of it, but some of it might be beyond their age limits. But I think maybe most kids have seen like The Sandlot, or they've seen, I'm trying to think of the other one that's Little Big League or something like that, more kids type movies. So we were talking about Bull Durham, something about the Pecos League and being in that kind of bus schedule. What do you remember most about that?
It wasn't even a bus schedule. We were driving ourselves around.
Okay, so wow. Okay, I didn't know that.
It was, it was staying in Motel 6s. It was eating fast food because it was what was cheap. It was spending 9-10 hours at the field with guys in our clubhouse, and it was baseball only. It was hard because my first start, I went after I finished my student teaching. I was there for 2 weeks. I went back, got married, and then I went back straight back to work that weekend. And just, it was 10 hours, 70 hours a week of being around baseball, and it was awesome. It's
interesting because I don't know if any of your kids know that or if you've ever talked to them about that, but everyone's vision of professional baseball is different. When you talk to younger players, they think Angels, Dodgers, things like that, but they don't understand what it takes to get there to that level, the sacrifice that a lot of those guys have made to just get that few moments of glory on there. What were some of the cities that you guys hit when you were?
So we were in Trinidad, Colorado, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay.
We played in Keno in Tucson. That was awesome. That was an awesome experience. Garden City, Kansas. They ended up being in Roswell, New Mexico. And it says expanded. There's a couple teams now in that league in California. So, we were primarily Kansas, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, and then there's a team in Texas.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. So anybody that's watching out there, any of you high school guys that are thinking about, pro ball, remember there's a lot of levels getting up there. So look up some of the cities that he mentioned, and you can see how big some of those are and what is actually involved in those. And a lot of times it's not playing in front of 10, 20,000 people. It's you playing to try to stay involved in the game and try to hone your skills still and develop so you can move on. As far as that type of environment, what type of coaching did you get when you were there, or was there a lot of it?
It was more managerial, and there was the one manager per staff, and if you were, a lot of them were not pitching coaches, so it was kind of just working with the other guys on the staff and saying, hey, this is what I think about this. Like, how do you approach this? Or here's what I do. Like, what do you do? And just trying to learn from the other guys. And everyone has their experience, and just trying to learn from their experiences and how does it apply to you.
That's interesting too, because talking to some players, trying to explain to younger players that I think a lot of times parents as well, they'll assume that as you move higher up in the levels, you get more instruction and you get more coaching, but they don't understand that when you're moving up, excuse me, they don't understand when you're moving up that you're expected to know more. And so like you had mentioned, you're kind of in a professional environment where they expect you to know how to do your job. They expect you to know how to discipline yourself and be ready to do your job. And if there's any input, it's going to be with interaction with the other players, because now you're a professional. And just like any other job, you know, professional teacher, you don't have someone in your classroom every day going, okay, this is what we're going to do. Hey, you're here because you know what you're supposed to do. Now go do it and execute, you know. So it's hard to try to get players to do that. Is there something that you might do with your players as far as a schedule, as far as a structure that you do, that you kind of give them ownership of?
We kind of give them ownership of their arm care. Like if they need more specifics of, well, I have, you know, soreness here, I've got a pain here, they'll come approach us with that. But it's, they know the expectations. They know they're supposed to do their band work before they throw. They know they're supposed to stretch, do their dynamic and statics before they throw. They know we try to do some conditioning, position specific stuff between stretching and throwing, and they know they're supposed to do that. And so we kind of give them the expectations and let them work within that. But in terms of like the practice schedule, more day to day, we kind of identified the specifics of what we think they need, and we'll give them some drills to work with that.
Good. Yeah. And I think too, with high school kids, sometimes they may see themselves as professionals sometimes, and they may be a little hesitant to learn new things, but understanding that, hey, you're also there to prepare them for being on their own in college. And just because the coach doesn't give you something to do, if that's part of your routine, I need to make sure I have time to incorporate it, because going back to what you'd said, it's about my development on the mound, and I have to take ownership of it. And sometimes if I need 2 extra hours of work a week to get there, then I need to do that and put in that time.
Absolutely.
So just to wrap it up, I have a question as far as if you were to give advice to just young pitchers or even parents, as far as things that you would really like to see every young player incorporate as far as throwing, or as far as arm care, or just improving their own, now that you're seeing those younger kids come up, what advice would you give them to focus on?
I think a lot of non-pitchers try to emphasize more bullpens, more time on the mound, more I got to throw 100% all the time. And I just don't think that's true. I think there's a lot of value in long tossing, pulling down on the way in, and then working on your craft right there in a flat ground. The best time to work on hitting your spots is every time you throw. And so it's not necessarily discrediting time on the mound. I think there's a time and a place for that. But I think every time you throw, it's not just I'm getting my arm loose. It's I'm trying to increase my arm strength, and I'm trying to work on hitting a spot. And so, you know, playing the game at 21 where you can go 2 points or 1 point, 2 points, and just playing catch and just trying to beat people. There's the competitive aspect, and there's trying to hit your spots. You can do change up only game, and just trying to find other ways to improve your pitches without being on a mound. I think it's one thing that's greatly overlooked at the younger ages.
Oh, that's good. I mean, again, I like picking brains because there's different generations, but that's something that I remember we were told 30, 40 years ago, and I think sometimes it's forgotten. You know, you see a lot of kids playing catch, and you know, you can just watch kids in your area if you ever go down to the pony leagues or whatever, and it's usually the coach is sitting in the dugout and the kids are out there just kind of playing catch. And you know, if you send a 12-year-old out to warm out, he's back in 3 minutes, and I'm good. And he didn't do anything. So it's really important for them to understand that. And I mean, I think even just playing catch with a purpose, because that's the main part of the game. You know, if you can't do that, you're not going to be helping anybody. So going forward, again, like I said, I'm hoping that we can maybe do this at the end of a season and we can talk about how you guys did and
Sure.
how you guys ended up in the playoffs. But, with this situation, I'm just thankful that, last time I think we talked was in San Diego for the World Games,
Yeah.
right? And that was actually kind of fortunate. That's one thing I miss too. I mean, you're from there, so for me, it's always like a weekend trip, but I miss going to those games. I love Petco Park. I love just being in that area.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate. One of the last trips that we took as a family was for my brother's birthday in March, and I remember then we were a little hesitant about, is it going to be crowded? Should we go? The hotels? But, it was a good time. So that was the last kind of open outing before they started really being cautious about interaction. And so, I love that area. So I would love to have a chance to go down and watch your guys throw and watch you kind of put them through their paces. But I'm really looking forward to that again. So, again, I appreciate you coming out, man. I'm pumped that you jumped at it, because we haven't had a chance to talk. And like I said, this situation, I'm trying to make the most of it, so I get to do this and I get to talk with friends and talk baseball. And when who knows, again, we'll have an hour to sit down and just chat.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I wish you the best, and make sure that we keep in touch. And it's interesting when you mentioned Matt Giuliani. I was going through the different coaching websites and I saw that he was at San Marcos. And actually, now I wanted to do that. I wanted to kind of pay my respects to Dennis Pugh, who passed away. I remember talking to him when he got the job down there, and he was, I forget which high school he was at, but he was at one of the San Diego high schools for quite a while before he got that job when they opened up San Marcos. And I remember the conversations he and I had with in talking about Baseball Factory guys that he might be interested in. But he's a good guy. It was tough to see that he had passed away, but he definitely did a great job starting that program. And then I remember as I was looking at Matt on there, I was trying to think where I know that name from. And so I'm scrolling through my phone, and I remember you had sent that to me way back when you were playing there, because I think I had a picture or two that I wanted to run past him. And I hadn't really mentioned to him, but I was going to reach out for him and see if he ever would be up in the area or would, want to sit down and chat baseball. Or hopefully we can be mobile and go down that way, because there's a lot of guys too that I want to get to sit down and talk to. But anyway, again, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate the insight. As soon as we get everything here, I'll send it to you. You can post it and give it to your guys and maybe reemphasize it. And like I said, I hope soon we can get out and watch you guys play. Yeah. But again, thanks, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So again, thank you to our guest, Eric Brothers from Escondido High School. And thank you to our sponsors, Chihuahua Cerveza, 100% Media, and Adam Schwartz Real Estate. So until next time, we'll see you.